Story 1. Honestly, how lonely and disconnected it can feel. As a child, you imagine adulthood as freedom, but no one tells you how hard it is to maintain friendships, find time for yourself, or just feel seen. Story 2. I thought certain jobs were filled only by smart, capable people such as doctors and lawyers. However, there are complete idiots everywhere, even in fields that are supposed to eliminate them. Story 3. There is no actual metric for being an adult that people seem to live by. No code, no standard. People are regularly immature in all walks of life. Story 4. Getting things done, such as doctor and dentist visits, oil changes, and house maintenance, all have to be done on the weekend if you are not trying to use paid time off or a day off. How am I supposed to get a rotting tooth pulled if I am in a cubicle for 9 hours a day, 5 days a week? Do not even get me started on how expensive personal upkeep is, and God forbid if you have to go to the hospital. Story 5. The most disappointing thing is that when I was a child, I thought I would be free when I grew up, but I found that freedom is often taken over by bills, responsibilities, and internal competition. Story 6. How intentionally people try to deceive and hurt others for the smallest reasons. It is very sad to see. Story 7. Between approximately 25 and 60 years old, your life tends to repeat every year or every few years unless you have money to prevent this repetition. Story 8. I thought the bullying and cliques would stay in middle and high school. Nope. There are grown men and women gossiping about other grown men's and women's clothing choices. Story 9. We could solve many of our nation's problems, but those in charge promote the idea of solving problems while keeping them in place to justify their paychecks. Story 10. How easily and compulsively some people can manipulate and lie. It is like they are not even trying, and yet they are so good at lying about everything. Story 11. The myth of work hard and move up the ladder. It is about who you know, not how hard you work. Also known as give the minimum and do only what is needed. Story 12. Being told my whole life to work hard, do well at school, get a degree, and you will be set for life. I did those things. I have reached the top of my field and make just enough money to get by. Do not get me wrong, my family and I are in a comfortable position that many would dream of. But it is not the financial utopia I was promised. I expected investment properties, boats, jet skis, cars, and more, the things my parents had with much lesser careers. Instead, after earning a couple of degrees and working my way to the top of my field, I have been able to provide my family with a modest home and food. Things I would expect virtually anyone with a job to afford. But I guess that is the point. Now, having a job does not mean you will earn a livable wage. Story 13. Too many hold this immature, ignorant, and hypocritical opinion. If my opinion is popular, it must be true. Story 14. Realizing how little we have evolved from children and from other mammals in terms of controlling our emotions and impulses. Story 15. Probably the prevalent double standard among adults. It is always right if it is them, but if it is others, then it is wrong. I just cannot understand how unfair it is. Story 16. What disappoints me the most in the adult world is how often authenticity is traded for appearances and how rarely rest is valued without guilt. Story 17. Lack of nuance. People think everything is black and white, but adult life and situations are mostly gray. It leads to an us versus them echo chamber with no ability or desire to listen or change. This is how the algorithm is designed. Story 18. Capitalist nonsense everywhere. Everyone trying to outdo the next person. Employers treating employees like middle school children. A general lack of decency and morals among people. Slaving your life away for next to nothing. Story 19. Politics. We grow up consistently hearing that the good guys win and the bad guys lose, but in the world of politics, people vote for the bad guys and celebrate the pain of others. Story 20. I am disappointed by the number of people who are genuinely motivated by a supremacy complex and who hate compassion. They tell themselves and each other any lie to justify being on the wrong side of history, and they are winning because of it. I know I am not an ideally compassionate person. I keep my behavior under control for the most part, but my thoughts and feelings can become quite hateful. My bitterness seems to be worsening as I get older. I hope to learn how to manage it because carrying hate in my heart feels heavy. Story 21. Entitled people who do nothing but freeload because they were not taught work ethic or how to give instead of take. Story 22. Loyalty is a thing of the past. Family dynamics have changed as well. It is just so different and disjointed. Story 23. Having to work overtime or even a second job just to have enough to meet the basic needs in life. Constantly living paycheck to paycheck because everything is constantly going up but the pay is not. Story 24. We teach our children to share, to be kind to others, and not to be mean or manipulative. Yet adults do all of these things and sometimes even get rewarded for it, such as becoming the president. Story 25. People who do not understand the difference between I believe X, so I cannot do that, and I believe X, so nobody can do that. Story 26. The hedonic treadmill. Any new experience, new acquisition, or new accomplishment is satisfying for only a short time, and I find myself seeking something new. I need something that endures, and I do not know where to find it. Story 27. The lack of community is troubling. Most people do not want anything to do with their neighbors and are unwilling to admit that we are all in this together. That makes me very sad. Story 28. Many of us did not mature and are basically just old children. Too many of us remain as cruel, judgmental, and narcissistic as we were during adolescence. Story 29. Figuring out what to eat for every meal and the chronic feeling of never having enough time in a day is constantly defeating. Story 30. How much free time adults actually do not have. As a child, I felt like my parents did so much and had all this free time. However, my parents do not need as much sleep as I do. I need 9 to 10 hours of sleep while they only require 3. Story 31. How pornography and social media, along with the internet in general, have ruined beauty, sex, and relationship expectations for at least one entire generation, as well as partially affecting the generations before and after for both men and women. Story 32. We have enough resources for everyone in the world to live well, yet we allow 1% of the population to hold 80% of the wealth. Story 33. How you are always chasing making it. I am 37 and just realized I need to enjoy the right now because it is passing me by, always working towards the next thing. Story 34. The fact that honor and reason are never listed on a job application. Lies and dishonesty are what get ahead. Story 35. A lot of things greatly disappoint me. If you were to ask me, I would say the thought of the days being never-ending draining cycles of the same things and the mental toll it takes on me, knowing it will not stop until I die. Also, the ignorance, especially growing up in America. I began to realize how selfish and ignorant people can be, the way people glamorize mental illness, that I did not wake up and win $1 million on a scratch-off ticket. I hate to say it, but Christians, as I got older, I felt like Christians forgot the core message and what the Bible says, using the religion to be hateful. I grew up around them, going to church, and the Bible I was taught is very different from the Bible that Christian nationalists spread. Story 36. Life isn't fair. Some seriously bad, horrible people get insanely rich and live fantastic lives, while good people get screwed over, get sick, or die young. It's just infuriating. Story 37. How quickly food goes off when you buy it, yet when your parents bought it, it seemed to last twice as long. Story 38. The myth that if you work hard, everything will work itself out is false. It is a myth, children. A large part of success is luck, such as the situation you were born into, who you know, and chance. Story 39. The fact is that you never really step into the adult world. You are always kind of waiting for that one day to eventually come, only to realize you are now 35 with 2 kids, a house, 2 dogs, and a cat. Time flies very fast. Story 40. Parenting culture. I expected all these parents to be really supportive of each other, but it turned into high school-style cliques with many sanctimonious people feeling superior to others. It was not universally bad, but it did make one thing clear. If someone is unpleasant, becoming a parent does not change them. It often makes it worse. Story 41. Quicksand. Where is all the quicksand? We thought we would be constantly dodging it throughout our rugged and dangerous adult lives. Story 42. Modern human resources departments are no longer primarily for employees. They have evolved from traditional administrative functions to strategic partners with executive leadership, focusing on data-driven decision-making and aligning human resources practices with overall business objectives. Furthermore, they are embracing technology and prioritizing adaptation to a changing workforce. Do not trust a human resources representative in any meeting. They are there to observe and report back to executive leadership. If you are the subject, request a union representative to witness the interview. Story 43. 1. Realizing that people do not care about you as a person, which can be a bit freeing once you do not have to care about their opinions. Understanding that they will also trample on you to get ahead in any way. Financial, work, and personal relationships such as cheating or control through jealousy or narcissism. Story 44. The difficulty in making new friends. I am just getting into video games late in life. Man, let's hang out, dude. Story 45. How hard it is to just live. I just want time for one hobby. Please. But I am so exhausted after work that I do not have that kind of energy. Saturdays are for chores. Sundays are for sleep. I wish I had a break so I could be a human and was not constantly in a state of just doing enough to survive. Story 46. Having to hide how I truly feel just to get by. Facing people who clearly do not like me, and I do not like them either. Story 47. My stepdad worked his whole life, diligently working overtime and providing not only for our family but also taking care of his own parents and more. Yet when he got sick, he nearly lost everything. My mother died last week. The government is going to deduct the survivor pension he will receive from his disability payments, and he might lose his house and everything he built with my mother to ensure a happy retirement and an inheritance for us children. Do not work your life away for a promise of better times in old age. It is not guaranteed, and even if you make it that far, your health or the government might still take it from you. Enjoy your life right now as well. Story 48. How much time is wasted on meetings and bureaucracy that could be replaced by an email or a quick conversation? There is a significant amount of corporate theater where everyone pretends policies make sense when they obviously do not, but nobody wants to be the one to point it out. It is like everyone is just agreeing to participate in this elaborate performance of productivity. Story 49. Nothing is fair. You could do everything right, go above and beyond for everyone, work to try and make the world a better place, and still there is no change, no reward, no support. Nothing. Story 50. Acceptable public behavior includes wearing appropriate attire indoors, using turn signals, and not littering. It genuinely was better before. We now have a generation of adults with no shame, little filter, and no awareness of those around them. In the United States, gun fetishism has become mainstream. I am not against guns, but the situation has gone off the rails. This shift began in the 1980s when violence was considered acceptable, but any depiction of sexuality was forbidden. I do not understand why. I want to believe that people have always behaved this way and we just noticed it less, but it really is worse. Main character syndrome is widespread. Story 51. The virtues you learn as a child do not matter to most people. Having integrity, patience, a sense of justice, and caring for others does not get you as far as abandoning those values. I see more successful people who are dishonest, uncaring, and indifferent to fairness. Story 52. There is always something that needs to be done. You just want a moment's rest, but there is cleaning to be done. You have to cook, buy groceries, run errands, do car maintenance, and do laundry. It never ends. Just when you think it does, you have to go to work. Story 53. The most disappointing thing for me is the number of people who lack empathy. It seems they do not understand how societies function. The political leaders in my country just voted to give another significant tax break to billionaires by cutting desperately needed social programs. As a result, 1.7 million people in my state alone will lose their healthcare coverage. Children will be deprived of food and education, and the gap between the wealthy and the poor will grow even larger. The troubling fact is that many supposedly adult people who are lower middle class and poor support the elimination of these programs even though it harms others. People will willingly vote against their own best interests if it allows them to oppose their political opponents or certain racial groups. I strongly dislike having to confront this reality. Story 54. The entitlement of some people is frustrating. Some adults never learned as toddlers that the world does not revolve around them and they cannot always get their own way. Other people have things going on that they are unaware of. When you have no choice but to tell them, they do not care because they want what they want. Children can be somewhat forgiven because their behavior is a product of their environment, but as an adult, it simply makes you a bad person. Story 55. How hard it is to feel happy nowadays. It seems that every year it becomes more difficult to feel excited about anything. I miss feeling excited for holidays, presents, and new releases of games and movies. However, this feeling might just be a personal experience and not necessarily related to being an adult. Story 56. Magic and fantasy do not exist, even in the slightest. I am not into live-action role-playing or fantasy, Dungeons and Dragons, and I played some video games but was never very invested in the whole thing. It is not like I am already thinking about it a lot or longing to live in the Shire. It is just a little disappointing that there is no definitive proof of the existence of pixies, fairies, ghosts, or similar beings. I am very open-minded and believe in the paranormal, but I have never personally witnessed anything truly magical or supernatural. I have seen some unusual things, but never anything that changes my perception of reality. Story 57. Working more than 40 hours a week leaves barely any time for family, friends, hobbies, or fun. All you do is work, and it starts to damage your mental health. I am 41 and have been working since I was 15. I have realized that working 5 days a week is torture. A 4-day workweek would be much better. Anytime I manage to get a 3-day weekend, I feel much better. If full-time work was 4 days, people would be much happier in life. Story 58. After spending 8 years as an Army Ranger and moving into the corporate world, I can tell you a few things. No, you are not a boss babe. You are just difficult to your coworkers. B. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is not an excuse for being 30 minutes late to work because you forgot to set an alarm. C. Just because of your position does not mean that interns' advice is not useful or valid. Position does not equate to wisdom. Story 59. The burdens that many women carry these days are heavy. Many of us are seen as servants. Expectations of men are decreasing continuously. Story 60. I thought gambling would be more fun. Turns out the more you do it, the more boring it becomes, like pretty much everything else, I suppose. Story 61. Lack of summer and winter vacations. I didn't realize how much I took it for granted as a child. My ultimate goal in life is to own my own company and ensure I get ample time off during these periods. Story 62. I thought being an adult meant freedom. It turns out it is just a never-ending cycle of saying, next week should be better, while stress-eating shredded cheese at 2 a.m. over the sink as if it is a fine delicacy. Bills show up like surprise party guests you never invited. Vacuuming counts as a workout now. Somehow, I owe the government money for working, but if I do not work, I still owe them money. Also, nobody warned me that 90% of adulthood is just opening the fridge, closing it, and going to bed angry. Story 63. How people get away with being spiteful, sneaky, and lying, how the bad outweighs the good, and how self-absorbed people can be too. Story 64. Money, regardless of political party, trumps morality. Israel, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, and others. There is also a lack of initiative among the average adult to proactively embrace change. Story 65. The strange, overly political nature of conversations in my peer group, late 20s, is frustrating. I got married and have 2 kids. I don't know what is happening outside of my 2 children under the age of 2. Please stop coming to me with your political rants from either side, fueled by being single and constantly exposed to TikTok news cycles. Story 66. People are unwilling to take responsibility for their own actions or inactions. It seems like a whole generation has decided it is easier to pout and complain instead of doing something to improve their situation. Story 67. Knowing that adults are just grown-up children and will still completely act like toddlers when told no. Story 68. The lack of driving logic. I believe COVID-19 really harmed us. Stop accelerating to red lights and stop traffic on the highways. Use your turn signals. The left lane is for passing. If you are not passing, keep right. When pulling into traffic, do not slow down traffic behind you. Drive on the highways as if using the brakes is the most expensive part of owning a vehicle. When you are behind stop-and-go traffic, stop driving like sheep. Accelerate smoothly and maintain momentum without using your brakes. Eventually, your fellow drivers will follow your lead, and you will break up the stop-and-go traffic. Story 69. People who act like they are the main character in the story when out in public. Playing loud music or talking on video calls in public without headphones. Story 70. All the propaganda for everything. Also, knowing that everything we experience is filtered through a focus group. Story 71. 2 points. The world is not a meritocracy. Human beings are not in the business of making the world a better place. Story 72. The number of adults who act like children is surprising. The lack of patience for anything is staggering. People cannot wait more than 3 minutes in a checkout line or restaurant without becoming upset. They tailgate while driving because others are not speeding to their desired level. The insistence on convenience, instant gratification, and an overall lack of patience will lead to negative consequences for everyone. Story 73. People being extremely negative and cynical, saying it is just reality and having no dreams or hope. Story 74. Toxic competitive work culture. People are willing to undermine others to cover their own mistakes. Story 75. You are forced to interact with people you do not necessarily like or care about because you need money to survive a rigged game that you never wanted to play. Story 76. How afraid we have become of being our real selves. It is as if almost everyone is living a double life. One version crafted to be socially acceptable, polished, and palatable, and another quieter version where our true thoughts, quirks, desires, and emotions live in hiding. We shrink ourselves to fit into expectations, wear masks to be normal, and suppress the parts that feel too loud, too soft, too different to us. Not because we do not want to be real, but because we are scared of being judged, misunderstood, or rejected. Somewhere along the way, authenticity gets traded for acceptance. That is what breaks my heart a little. Story 77. The fact that we are all indentured servants to a capitalist system that does not care about anything but profits. Story 78. I think it is mostly about how other people behave and their lack of respect for others. I find it very sad. Story 79. How many adults are just grown-up children still carrying around their unhealed trauma, and how often that turns into hurtful behavior, toxic workplaces, or broken relationships. I thought adults had it all figured out. Turns out most are just winging it or worse, stuck in the same cycles they never dealt with. Story 80. Governments are wasting people's hard-earned money instead of lowering taxes and retirement age. Greedy, self-serving individuals. Story 81. How many people do not think about the long term? Short-sightedness, the greed for money and power, and people not thinking for themselves. Story 82. There is a tremendous amount of immaturity. I am not exactly the most responsible person, but I feel like many people stop maturing at age 12. Story 83. How expensive it is to live. I never understood how expensive things were when I was living at home. My parents were such good cooks and knew how to stretch a dollar. Suddenly, that Cheer tasty cheese for $15 is crazy when I have to buy it myself. Story 84. How much do adults act more like kids than kids? I was really looking forward to becoming an adult and not having to deal with immature people, and lo and behold. Story 85. Adults do not behave maturely. They act like immature children despite having more power and responsibilities. Story 86. Super rich people still exploiting others for more money, even though they can live extravagant lives on wealth they could never spend. Story 87. That childish bullying is still a thing in adulthood. I can't believe how many adult toddlers are walking around. People demanding special treatment. What disappoints me most is that retail and corporate businesses enable it by giving the demanding customer everything and the patient, kind, loyal customer nothing. It is unacceptable. Story 88. Money. No amount is ever enough. You get a higher paying position. That only means more problems and responsibilities. Then, when you get used to your salary, you somehow end up living paycheck to paycheck. Little me would have been like, wow, you make X dollars? You're rich, and I would be doing this and that if I made that much. Nope. Just simply nope. Story 89. Adults disappoint me on a daily basis. Many of the people I thought were good people are disappointing. The people who make promises and commitments often let you down. Story 90. Thinking others can help for the better out of simple goodwill. I have noticed many people are selfish or driven by a me mindset. Story 91. You have to love and care for yourself. No one else truly cares about you, perhaps except your partner, close friends, and your pets. Story 92. How immature, self-righteous, and cliquish people remain as adults. Petty arguments, no introspection, wanting to still be 20. It has blown my mind. Not just my age group, but also people in their early 30s and older. It is wild how the hive mentality and fitting in continue to matter to people. Or how much the popular people thrive on it and it works. Story 93. It is so difficult to care about things. I feel like a sense of meaningfulness and intrinsic motivation comes more easily earlier in life. Story 94. People who exhibit negative behavior in childhood often continue such behavior into adulthood. They become a respected part of society, surrounded by others who share their way of thinking, and they all pretend to be good individuals. Story 95. Many top-level managers are inexperienced. They obtain high-profile positions because they previously worked with the new chief executive officer. However, they often lack the necessary skills and are largely ineffective. For context, this is about the International Aerospace Corporation based in Connecticut. Story 96. The please, thank you, and you're welcome talk that our parents hammered into us as children was all nonsense, because most adults are worse than children at throwing tantrums. Story 97. Most things involving money end up being some sort of scam. Whether it is products you buy pretending to be something they are not, a service you pay for with an unreasonable margin, or a doctor who 90% of the time cannot determine the condition. Medical insurance, car rental, airline mistreatment of customers, and politics all exhibit similar issues. Story 98. There does not seem to be a state of being grown up. As a child, you think adults are wise knowledge centers, and you rely on that your entire life. Then you become an adult, and your interactions seem no different from how they have always been, but now within a context of responsibility and career. People remain as emotional, petty, and foolish as they always were as children. Story 99. How so many adults behave much worse than badly behaved children. Entitled, impatient, irritable, noisy, and more. What makes it worse is that you cannot simply tell them to be quiet. Otherwise, all chaos breaks loose. That is why when people say they hate children, I immediately suspect they have poor character. Story 100. No one wants to help anybody. We elect these so-called leaders who just make our lives harder to live. I cannot afford anything because of greed. Either things seemed easier in the 1990s and 2000s or I am just old. Story 101. When you are a child, everything leads you to believe that good people get rewarded and bad people face consequences. When you are an adult, you know that while bad people often succeed more than they should, good people can have their entire lives ruined because they fail to meet the standards of goodness they set for themselves, even in a minor lapse of judgment. Story 102. The fact that everyone without ethics seems to be getting ahead in life while the people who were raised to be helpful and honest are suffering. The endless work I am forced to do, all of it. Story 103. Taxes affect everything. I was born and raised in Southern California. I love it here. From the coastal beaches to the mountains, there is so much to explore and enjoy. However, it feels like every bit of income is taken from us with very little in return. Our gas prices are $1.50 to $1.75 per gallon higher than the average due to taxes. Los Angeles County sales tax is around 10%. Our property taxes are very high, and now homeowners' insurance rates have skyrocketed. I understand that taxes are needed for infrastructure improvements and maintenance. I would have no problem with this if our tax dollars actually went toward improving and maintaining infrastructure. My wife and I both work and are doing well financially, but we are not independently wealthy. I feel like there is always something to pay for with little or no return. Story 104. The superficial nature of male relationships is much worse in adulthood than in childhood. Additionally, many adults still behave like entitled children. Story 105. America has the money and resources to make decisions that help the masses, but it continues to prioritize corporate greed and the wealthy. People are just trying to get by, and this country is in a difficult situation. In general, it is disappointing that people often behave poorly. Story 106.1. Lack of genuine friendships. The continuous pursuit of materialistic goods with no end. The complete disregard for future generations. Our children want parents, not expensive trips and toys. Many are willing to show off their virtues but do not truly care about others as long as they get what they want. This is very disappointing. Story 107. The inherent unfairness of it all. The fact that the correlation between doing the right things and having the right things come to you is somewhat misleading. The fact that people who cannot spell your name correctly in emails have jobs that pay significantly more than yours while you are just scraping by. I hear many women talk about how abusive or unpleasant former partners or dates were, and it genuinely would not occur to me to do some of those things to them or any other women. Yet, that person can have several girlfriends while I have yet to have a single serious date. Working hard on yourself and your career ultimately does not matter if the luck factor is not present, and that is not something you can ever truly control. Story 108. People's behavior is often just as immature as it was in high school and grade school. People often do not mature. Story 109. How absolutely terrible it is. Working 5 days to get 2 days off. What is this? Chores pile up, so the 2 days you have off are busy with more work. Laundry is a never-ending story. Inflation is so high you cannot get ahead. There is nothing good about it. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.